Welcome to Hebrew Culture 101. My name is Isaac Ben Israel, and today we're going to cover what happens when we die. Will we go to heaven? Now, in examining that, we have to go to the most popular verse known to man, which is John 3:16. And most of us can say it right off the top of our head without even looking at a Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Now, back up 3 verses from that, and it says, no man has ascended up to heaven, but he that came from heaven. So then we must get down into some things and figure out, where did we get this idea that man would die and immediately go to heaven? I want to read something to you. In Matthew 19 and verses 16 and 17, it says, and behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life? You notice that the question was not what good thing that I should do that I may go to heaven. And this is the things that we are hearing constantly. We hear all the time when we go to a funeral, or we hear somebody talk about their past loved ones. They'll say that they're in heaven looking down upon us. But when we examine what's written in this book, we find something totally different. I want to read something else to you in John chapter 11, dealing with this situation of Lazarus being dead. It says, Yeshua says unto her, Your brother shall rise again. Martha says unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So now we're seeing somebody who's dealing directly with Christ, and they never expected that their loved one would go to heaven. They always expected that their loved one would be resurrected at the last day. So then everyone is resurrected at the same time. You have to consider this individual trip to heaven that people are professing. It then leaves each person without their family. They are going to heaven, which is to be a paradise. And how can that actually be a paradise if they are then leaving those loved ones and still have recollection of those loved ones that they have left behind? But you see the way that this woman who dealt directly with Christ, she understood that that would all happen at the same time. When we deal with this, I want to, because I know this sounds like a foreign concept to many people. So I want to read something to you in Revelation chapter 20. And this goes into dealing with the first and second resurrection. So I'm going to start this at verse 1. It says, And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So you see that there is a connection to the being raised at the last day and Satan being thrown in this pit. Verse 3. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should not deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. Now, it says after that, he must be loosed a little season. So now we're seeing the first and second resurrections being dealt with in this portion here. Because we have the first resurrection, he is set forth, separated, set a seal upon him for 1,000 years. Verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls, missed something here. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yeshua, and for the word of Elohim, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So this is the portion that you want to be a part of. You want to live and be with Christ the 1,000 years that he is upon the earth and the devil is not. Verse 5. But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. How many of us have never even heard that there was a first and second resurrection? That is because it is very difficult to talk about the things that are actually written in this book if you are going to bewitch the people with fables that make people a lot of money. You have to understand how much money is contained in these funerals. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 18, it says, who concerning the truth have erred, saying that the resurrection is past already, and overthrow the faith of some. Now you see how some people's faith could be overcome if they thought that they missed the resurrection. But now we've gotten to a day and time when people don't even know to look forward to the resurrection. Everything has turned to a personal, instant gratification that that person dies and they are immediately in heaven, and it is not backed up by what is in this book. So we have to then consider, if we deal with that, then how is man supposed to deal with this? Let's read what thus says the Adonai Elohim. In the beginning, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 19, it says, in the sweat of your face shall you eat bread, till you return unto the ground. For out of it were you taken, for dust you are, and unto dust you shall return. So we see that a correct burial then would be man returning to the ground, the same ground that man was made from. So we immediately see this, but what we've been told is that the spirit leaves and automatically goes to heaven, even though this body is resting in the earth. I want to read something else to you so that we can understand how these things have been used to merchandise us. John chapter 19 and verse 40. It says, they took the body of Yahshua Christ and wound it in linen clothes with spices, as the manner of the Yehudis is to bury. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre, wherein was never man yet laid. So you see, automatically at Christ's death, it was never a thing of cremating his body. There was never a thought of doing any of those things. Automatically there was sought a place for a burial. Now you also see the manner in which that burial took place. It says they wound it in linen clothes with spices. So this comes back to why we have this automatic vainglorious thing of man automatically going to heaven. It makes a lot of people a lot of money in conducting these funerals, and families have to pay for that. So if they're going to pay for that, then it must be something that's going to make them feel justified in shelling out over $10,000. Now, if you remember, there was this situation where this woman came and poured oil or anointed Christ with this special oil, and the disciples were upset, saying that this money, this precious ointment could have been sold, and the money could have been added to what they were using to, do the things that they needed to do. And Christ intervened and said, let the woman alone. For this that she has done will be spoken of for a memorial for her. For she has done this for my burial. Now think about the things that we just read. You talk about wounding, the body being wounded in linen and then spices. So then you go back to what the woman did and you find all that is supposed to happen for a burial. So you consider there's not a lot of money that is needed for a linen wrap and spices. So then that leaves a lot of today's preachers and funeral homes out of much money if we deal with that. Let's look at how quickly these things progress. I'm going to read something to you in John chapter 11. It says, Yeshua said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, said unto him, Adonai, by this time he stinks, for he has been dead for 4 days. So we see that immediately upon the death of a man, this funeral was then conducted. This so-called burial. I won't say funeral because there's a lot of things that pops up into our mind when we do this. I'm going to back up or jump down a little bit and read something else in John chapter 11, verse 43. It says, and when he had thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound with a napkin. Yeshua said unto them, loose him and let him go. So there are several things that you did not hear in that. And there's a reason why you did not hear it. Now, they went in unto him. It was only 4 days, but she said, he stinketh. Keep in mind what happens at a funeral home. They embalm the body. And in doing so, they are doing all of these things to the body to make the body presentable for this open viewing burial. When you get down to what happened with Christ, you find what? His body was wound. Lazarus' body was wound. So this automatically lets you know that there's no open viewing burial according to what thus says Yahweh, the creator of all things. Man has given us this. So we end up spending all of this money to prepare a body for burial, and it ends up sending us in debt and making the preacher and the funeral home an enormous amount of money. So then the question we have to ask then is, where did these caskets come from? And we can go into Genesis chapter 50 and find that out. It says, so Joseph died being 110 years old. It says, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So we see that this whole practice of embalming, Joseph had his father embalmed, but do understand, when we read about how Christ dealt with his people, she said what? Martha said it's been 4 days, and by now he stinketh. The Egyptians had set 40 days for the embalming period. Then there's a 30-day period for mourning for the body or the death of that person. So now we have a 70-day period that this body is out. Then Joseph dealt with this, knowing that his father would then have to be shipped to go to be buried in Canaan. But you see also, the biggest part of what we spend money on is what? The casket. Right here it says he was put in a coffin in Egypt. When you heard about the 2 burials of Christ and his friend, you notice you did not hear anything about a coffin? Did you notice that they rolled back the stone, went into the cave, and told him to come out? They didn't even have to dig him up. So consider these things when we deal with whether or not man goes to heaven immediately, or whether we are supposed to spend $10,000 to $15,000 on a funeral. These were poor people who followed Christ, yet they still had the means to bury him. They did not follow the ways of Egypt. So now we have these Egyptian ways. Do understand, the Egyptians embalmed the body because they thought that they were going to be using that body in another life. They even put all kind of money and all kind of things in their little tombs and whatnot, because they thought that they were going to wake up with that body. Some even had servants killed when they died, so that their thought was when they woke up, they would not only have this body prepared, they would also have these servants who were killed and placed alongside of them. Hopefully that clears up what happens after you die. Thank you for tuning in to Hebrew Culture 101. Shalom.